cursor shows the current view. How do we handle that in terms of using the main queue or not the main queue? Because we can't do UI things on the non-main queue, but in the background.
Great question. Okay, so the question is, something's happening and I'm in the background and my UI needs to get updated. Like a URL comes back or I get offered to do a background fetch. I'm doing all these things. And isn't there a problem there because I need to do all my UI in the main queue? That's the question. And that's a great question. But the answer is, when you're running in the background, you're not on a different queue. That background just means that you are not the app that the people are looking at. But otherwise, it's just like you're running in the foreground. You can draw, you can do everything. Your main queue is running. Okay? When you get the opportunity to run like this, it's your main queue that's running. So you can do graphics, you can do drawing, anything you want. Right? So the difference between foreground and background is not main queue, some other queue. It's am I the active app, am I not the active app? That's the difference between foreground and background. Normally when you're in the background, you don't get to run. Okay? Your main queue gets no cycles because none of your app gets any cycles, okay? Normally. But then occasionally you'll get the background fetch or a URL will come back, or if you're a location thing, like I was saying we're going to talk about today, you can get messages that, hey, the phone has moved to a new location. You get a push notification that I was talking about earlier, you know, Facebook sending you a message. Those things will wake you up in the background and you can get a little time to process. Anytime you're given an opportunity to run in the background a little, you only get a little bit of time. Understandably. You can't sit there and run for 10 minutes. Okay? The whole point is to kind of keep you, when you're not the app that the user is using, want to keep you, you know, not using a lot of resources so the battery doesn't drain. Okay? So, good question. Yeah.
If you do happen to start something that takes 10 minutes to finish, is the system just going to cut off the process or is it going to pause you? Or?
So the question is, what if I get an opportunity to run in the background here from one of these many mechanisms, and I do start doing something that takes 10 minutes? What's going to happen? And the answer is, the system's going to just stop you. It's just your process is going to stop. Okay, so you're not going to get to finish. And that will create all kinds of bad things. Your user will be like, what's going on? You know, and it's bad for you. Things will time out if you're accessing the network, all kinds of bad things. Okay, so the answer is you don't want to do that. And the answer is the system will not let you do it. Good question. All right, anything else? Great question. This is a great slide because we got to basically talk about multitasking here. Okay. All right. So let's continue our Photomania demo here. And like I said, I'm going to make it into an iPad app. Actually, I'm going to make it a universal app. Okay. Believe it or not. This is going to be a fairly short demo. And we've kind of built so much reusable parts here and so much knowledge that you have that we can really quickly now make these apps do much more sophisticated things. And then I'm going to demo a new thing that you've never seen before, which is how to make a popover segue. Okay? This is a new kind of segue. We talked about it in a lecture a few lectures ago, but I never asked you to do it on homework, and I never demoed it, so I'm going to demo it here. Oh, yes. Okay, let's quit that. All right, so let's go run Photomania. So this is back to Photomania. This is exactly where it was when I posted it. Okay, so this is the posting, and you can see actually here's the perform fetch, and you see how I'm just doing a normal ephemeral URL fetch. I'm not calling start Flickr fetch here. And this guy is not, okay, I know it is. Okay, we'll deal with iTunes when we get there. All right, so, anyway, but this is exactly what I posted last week, okay, last Thursday or whatever. So what did this do? Let's run this just so we can remind ourselves what Photomania does. It's been more than half a week. And there it is. It just fetches in the background, and also when it launches, kind of a bunch of recent photos from Flickr, and then it basically makes a table of all the photographers who took the photos. So these are all photographers, not photos, photographers. But we'd love to be able to click on these and see the photos by that photographer, right? But we can't because we never put any segues in here, we never do anything. And plus, our app doesn't work at all on iPad. In fact, let's go look at our iPad storyboard. You can see it right here. It's just this big blank screen. So if I ran this on the iPad, it would be a big blank screen. So let's get rid of that. Now, I want to build my iPad UI here, but I'm going to do it in a way that I showed you a little bit before, but it's really powerful, which I'm just going to copy and paste it from another app. Because Shutterbug, if you remember, had a UI on the iPad that was very similar to what we want in Photomania. So I'm going to go over to Shutterbug. This is the Shutterbug as we last left it. And if you look at Shutterbug's iPad UI, this, it's kind of almost what we want. Shutterbug just shows the list of photos here. If we could just insert the list of photographers here in the middle, we'd have pretty much what we want on the iPad. So I'm just going to copy all of this, go back over here to Photomania, and I'm in my iPad storyboard here, and paste. Oops, I guess maybe select all over here, and let's see, select all, copy over here, and paste. Okay, so we put it in here. As usual, it's a little bit of a search party to find things. Oh, there it is. So here is that Shutterbug iPad UI. And like I said, basically I want to insert in between the list of photos a thing here where I can choose the photographer. The same thing, the thing I just showed you that we were running in Photomania. While I'm here in Shutterbug, let's grab the image view controller. We're going to need that, obviously. Our storyboard uses that, so we'll put that over here. Copy that in. And that's all we need from Shutterbug. So this, this storyboard is pretty much exactly what we want. There's a couple of minor things we need to fix here. One thing is we don't want this list of photos to be the root view controller of our split view. We want the photographer thing to be that. So where can we get our photographers table? Well, we actually have that too. That's here in our iPhone storyboard. That's what I just ran and showed you, right? This is the list. This table, if you inspect its identity, is this photographer's core data table view controller, right? So this is showing that list of photographers. So let's just copy this. Put this in our, oops. And where did it go? Oops, sorry. It's sometimes hard to find all these. There it is, okay? Notice that it looks really big. That's because I haven't segued to it yet, so it doesn't know that it's going to be in a master of a split view and be inside of a navigation controller like that. So let's go ahead and put that root view controller in there. Where is it? So here's the root of our navigation controller. This thing is also probably called Shutterbug. Yeah, let's change this to Photomania or maybe photographers, because that's what's going to show up in our root view controller. So I'm just going to control drag to the photographers one and reset that to be the root view controller. Okay, so now, get some more space here. All right, so now our API or our UI is a little more what we want. Okay, we have this photographer's thing here, and now what we want is each time we click on a photographer, one of these rows, then we want to go to a list of photos, right? So let's do that. So I'm just going to control drag from here to here, and this is inside a navigation controller, so I'm going to push. Okay, now we're really getting close to what we want. Okay, this says Shutterbug, but that's okay. It's going to be the title. We're going to reset that title anyway. And what's the problem with this UI? This UI is actually exactly what we want, except for one thing, which is that if we inspect this guy right here, it is a just posted Flickr photo CDTV, right? Because I copied it from Shutterbug, and that's what Shutterbug shows, right? The just posted photos. So really, we want this to be something like photos by photographer CDTVC, right? Because we're going to click on a photographer here, and we want this to show the photos by that photographer. Everyone understand why I'm saying that? So let's just set it to be that, and we're going to have to create this view controller right here. So let's do that. File, new file. It's a class. It's going to be a core data table view controller. We're going to call it photos by photographer CDTVC. We've got to make sure that this equals this, because I just set that to be the class in here. So let's put this, why it's offering that. Let's put this in Photomania. Huh, that's kind of weird. Okay, put it in there. All right. So here's our new photos by photographer core data table view controller. I'm going to not have you distracted by all this junk, so let's get rid of all that. When we create a new view controller, what do? We always kind of think of what is this thing's API, okay? What's its public interface? So let's look at the public interface of photos by photographer. And probably some of you are imagining that what this is. This is really simple. It's just going to be non-atomic strong. We need to pass the photographer in that we want to show the photos of. So I better import photographer. And then I can have a photographer Okay, so this is basically our public model. This is our model, and it's public. And so if someone sets this photographer, we better show the photos by that photographer. So this is a table that shows photos. The photographer determines which photos we show. Okay, now before we go off and implement this, I'm actually going to go down to our photographers core data table view controller. This is the thing that shows the list of photographers, okay, that I started off this lecture showing you. Hopefully you remember this code from last Wednesday. You can see that it's doing a fetch into the photographer, showing them by name. It's fetching all of them, right? I'm going to put in the navigation code to navigate from this photos one right here. This is the list of photos, right? List of photographers. This little segue right here. So let's give that little segue a name. We'll call it the show photos by photographer segue, because that's what it does, right? When we click on a photographer here, it's going to show the photos. And then let's go back to our photographer's core data table view controller, and let's do the navigation. Now, I'm going to show you something that I think you should probably do for your development process, which is to start use code snippets. Now, we talked about this in one of the Friday sections, so I'm not going to go over it again, but I have a code snippet that I've created, for example, which is a kind of generic table view navigation code snippet. So I start typing what I called it, table view navigation, and I'm going to hit return, and it's going to put it in. So put this code in here for me, and this is fairly generic, okay? And what does it do? Well, it does prepare for segue, and it also does did select row at index path. Okay, so this can work for a table view that is the master of a split view, and it will also work for something that is just going to segue via navigation controller or whatever. So how does it work? Well, for prepare for segue, it just gets the index path from the sender, which is a UI table view cell. You've already seen this code before, so it's nothing new. And then it calls this prepare up here, and we'll talk about what the prepare does in a second. And then the did select row at index path, it does the trick where it's looking at the detail controller of the split view. If it's a navigation controller, it looks inside of it for its root view controller, and then it's preparing that. Okay, everyone understand what these two methods do? Okay, so now we got to look at this prepare, because this is the thing that's actually doing the prepare. So here's that. And what this is going to do, it's going to get the managed object in the row in the table that we're talking about. Okay, and then it's going to check the class of the view controller we're segueing to. Maybe it's going to check the segue identifier as well. That's not going to be, did select row at index path is not a segue, so it's not going to be applicable there. But I check here to see if there is a segue identifier, and if there's not, then I ignore this part. And then I'm going to prepare that view controller for being segued to, or if it's the detail of the split view controller. Okay? So this case, we have photographers segueing to photos. So let's see what this looks like. Well, the NSManage object we have here that we're going to be looking for is a photographer. So I'm just going to replace this with photographer. Okay, just getting my object in index path out of my fetched results controller. You know what that is. And then what kind of view controller are we segueing to? Well, we're going to be segueing to one of these photos by photographer core data table view controllers that we just created. We haven't done the implementation of this yet, but we know what its public API is to set the photographer, which is exactly what we would want. So let's go ahead and import that. Import import photos by photographer. And then let's go down here and check that that's the class, photos by photographer.